Okay, we're back at the Kennedy Camp here again and the Solid Rock Sunday School class. This week, we probably are going to see some dates of some things coming up of services where we will be meeting in person again. And we are going to be holding this class out for a while, though. I'm not sure the exact dates. We've had a lot of discussions about this, but we will be continuing this online. So we'll continue doing this ongoing here even though we will not be having Sunday school in person here. It's been kind of a changing week, especially here in Bakersfield. A few things are opening. And one thing you might notice here that's opening is the fact I actually got a haircut. I was due for one when we went into this, and 2 months without a haircut and me trimming on my own, didn't exactly like the way it was going. So Charlene, you did an absolutely great job on it. I know you listen in sometimes. Charlene over at Westchester Barbershop, she's the best. So thanks again for working me into your schedule this week. So we've been working here with the fruits of the Spirit. And so far we've taken it out of order, but love, joy, peace, long suffering. And today we approach two of them. Today we're actually going to get into gentleness and we're going to get into goodness here. And remember, we're on this general thought, the church is not empty, the church is deployed. How are we affecting the people around us? That's what Christians do. As Christians, we are not supposed to be a thermometer. As a Christian, we are supposed to be a thermostat. We are supposed to control the attitude. We're supposed to control ourselves. We're supposed to control the atmosphere around us. So how are we affecting people around us in our Christian life? How do we walk? How do we talk? How is our attitude here? And this particular triad we're talking into has a lot to do with us and our attitude and the way we treat people. So today, again, we look beyond love, joy, peace, long suffering. And we're going to take two of them here today, and you'll see why later, but we're going to pick up gentleness and we're going to pick up goodness here. So let's pick back up in Galatians, the 5th chapter, and pick up in verse number 19. We're going to read our text again here, and it starts out and it says, "Now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and of such like, of which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God." Now, as we step into the 22nd verse, we talk about the fruits of the Spirit. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. And they that are Christ have crucified the flesh with the afflictions and lusts. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. So we are known by the way we treat people. That's what we're going to talk about today. And, this triad that we looked at initially of the love, joy, peace, those are habits of the mind. And of course, the source of it is from God, but it's habits of our mind. And so long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, it's the second triad of the fruits of the Spirit, and it's how we treat others, how our life overflows into other people's lives. So let's look at some of this here as far as the fruit basket that's been given to us, and look at this gentleness and goodness. So first, I want us to look at gentleness. And let's kind of define gentleness a little bit. I mean, what is gentleness? By the way, it's not some sort of a sissy man or something like that. What does it mean? We're talking about the sweetness of temper that puts other people at ease. It's talking about pleasantness, goodness, kindness, and just flat, not just a heart of kindness, but just kindness in general. So, let's take and look at how the word is used in the New Testament. The Greek word, I'm not going to get into all of, the Greek words here, please. We're not going to do that today. Don't have time for it. But it's kind of interesting here that this particular Greek word that's used in this text for gentleness, it's used 10 times in the New Testament. 4 of the times it's been translated as kindness, and 4 times it's translated as goodness. And that's a little bit confusing because the next one we're going to be looking at of the fruit of the Spirit is what? It's goodness. So, but the word goodness that's translated in Galatians, the 5th chapter, verse 22 that we're talking about today, it's actually a completely different Greek word. So it was also translated one time as good in Galatians that we see here, and this goodness that we see translated. So throughout the King James Version, it's been translated, some different ways, but it all has to do with conveying the right and the same meaning here. And I think the King James Version, it just did a very, very good job of making sure that it was used correctly. But I think maybe to better understand here some of the qualities, let's look at 3 different places it's used here, and some of the root words here that it's used from. And we're going to pick up in Ephesians, the 4th chapter, in verse number 32. And he says, and be kind. This is the same word that he's using for gentleness back in Galatians. And be kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another. And he goes on, but that is the main thrust of what I want to get here out of this verse. Be kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another. So a lot can be said about a person and about a person and who they hang out with, who they run with. You say, show me your friends and I'll show you what you're going to turn out like. Well, there's a lot of things here when we start looking at words. We can look at words and things that surround it and how words are used around it. And I guess you could call it the neighborhood of words here. And this word here translated kind in Ephesians 4:32, that's a pretty good example of it here. Ephesians 4:32, it says, and be kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, hath forgiven you. We're supposed to be as kind to other people as what God was when he sent his only son to die for us for our sin. So let's look a little further here. Tender-hearted. It's a first. This is kind of our first encounter with this. What do you think tender-hearted really means? Well, it's having pity. It's having compassion on others, and then forgiving. This is a real good word, isn't it? Forgiving. That's a good word for our Christian vocabulary. So he talks about tender-hearted. He talks about forgiving one another here. And these 3 words here, they all fit together very, very well. A person who is kind is also tender-hearted. A person that's tender-hearted is also kind. A person that's forgiving is kind and is tender-hearted. So one thing we see about gentleness is, in this blessed triad, I guess you could say, is kindness, tender-heartedness, forgiving spirit. Those 3 things all seem to kind of come together with this. Next, I think we go over to Colossians, the 3rd chapter, and we're going to look at verse number 12. And he says, put on, therefore, as the elect of God, holy, beloved, bowels of mercy, kindness. This is the same word translated for gentleness here. So remember back in Galatians 5:22, the list of the fruits of the Spirit, this humbleness of mind, meekness, and long suffering. So again, look at the word kindness. It's associated with all those. Now this bowels of mercy, that's kind of a weird phrase. It's kind of a weird word for us today. This bowels of mercy. It's just strange, but for that particular time, that was something that was used. Today we think more of saying it's from my heart. It comes from my heart. You know, can you ever actually imagine taking and whispering in your wife's ear or your girlfriend's ear, "Hey baby, I love you with all this, all my bowels," that it just doesn't go well together, does it? But well, anyway, Paul meant these bowels of mercy as being a heartful mercies is what we would understand it as. So the next word Paul uses in Corinthians 3:12 is humbleness of mind. Can you think of some synonyms that might kind of work with humbleness of mind? I think the only thing I can really come down with here is just humility itself. Next Paul talks and tells us here in Colossians to put on meekness and long suffering. These are two qualities that are in the list of the fruits of the Spirit back in Galatians. So we already studied, long suffering, and we'll examine meekness a little bit later. So let's hold off on that for right now. Again, these are all associated words. As we look at how they're related, do you get a feeling that we might kind of maybe need a little bit of an attitude adjustment, maybe? God is saying the very same thing to us. We need to get an attitude adjustment here. We need to walk in the Spirit. So we take and we manifest, we make people realize, we make known the fruits of the Spirit here, the attitudes that are associated with the fruits of the Spirit. Every believer ought to be characterized by what we're talking about, by kindness, tenderheartedness, forgiving, mercy, humility, meekness, long suffering. Those ought to be the characteristics of a Christian. The next word Paul uses in Colossians 3:12 is this humbleness of mind, which is just that humility, that we just talked about. I'm going to keep going on here. And it says, So I think, when we really look at the fact that as Christians, we are supposed to have these attitudes of the fruits of the Spirit. I think what we can really think of here is, wow, we really take and we fall short of what God wants for us in our life. We have fell short of the ideal person God wants for us to be. Finally, let's look at 1 Corinthians, the 13th chapter. This is the love chapter, and we're going to look at verse number 4 in 1 Corinthians, the 13th chapter, verse 4. And he says, charity, which is love, suffereth long. It's kind. It's kind. Another variation of the exact same word we was talking about. Charity suffereth long. It's kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up. So the connection here is that kindness is an expression of love. If we really love someone, we're going to be kind to them. Unfortunately, I think often we feel that we can kind of love someone and he or she, should accept us for what we are, and we just kind of take them for granted, and our behavior sometimes is a little bit not what it should be. Sometimes we're better off with strangers than what we are sometimes with family. This is kind of dangerous in our thinking. We need to be careful with this. I don't know why that sometimes, people we love, that we don't necessarily treat them the way that we should. But let's go on here, and Paul, he takes and we step in back into Galatians, and he has that word goodness here. What is goodness in this Greek word? It's found 4 times in the New Testament, and all 4 times the King James Version, it constantly translates this as goodness. So notice again that it includes not only the qualities of being good, but also of having the beneficial effects of good here. So being good, it comes from this new life. excuse me, I just bumped my podium here and just messed up. It looks like the camera got crooked. Let's see if we can't move that around a little bit. I'm sorry about that. So I just kind of bumped something I shouldn't have done. Let me see if I can get back to where we need to be here. So let me pick back up, so Paul's referring to goodness here. And being good one to another. Doing good things, it's not something that's just totally natural, but for the Christian, doing good things should become natural within our life. Being good, it comes from this new life in God. This new life that God has given us, the salvation that we have in our life. We are a reflection of God. Again, we're deployed. Think about this goodness of God. He sent his son. He made salvation available to us. If it wasn't for God's goodness, we wouldn't be here, or we would go to hell. We need to thank God for his goodness. Don't take it for granted. Think about all the paths he's taken us on. He has not all, it hasn't all been good. Boy, some of it's been really, really difficult. I know it has been in my life, and I'm sure it has been in everybody's life. Sometimes it's just difficult. But when we are Christians, it's meant for our good. It's something to do with growing. It's steps we need in our life. Sometimes you don't realize why we've went through a difficult time, and sometimes for years later, and you look back and you say, I understand why I went through that difficult time. So, we need to remember, God is directing our steps. We see the goodness of God all day long. Many times we just don't recognize it. Sometimes we don't, I guess you could say, we don't stop long enough to smell the roses. We just don't recognize it. So we need to look around us. We need to be more aware of what's around us. James, the first chapter, verse number 17. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, and it cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom is no variance, neither shadow of turning. Notice he says every good gift, and I think sometimes we know what good gifts are. And then he says every perfect gift. Every perfect gift may not feel good at the time. It may be one of those things where we're going through a difficult time, but it's meant for our good. Every good gift and every perfect gift, it comes from where? It comes from God. The question is, do we recognize it? Psalms, the 34th chapter, 34th division of Psalms, verse number 8. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth in him. So what does Jesus tell us here about what is inside of our hearts? So goodness is practical Christianity. Goodness that we are overflowing with is practical Christianity. It's love in action. Goodness is this practical demonstration of love and kindness that we just talked about. So kindness has to do with attitude towards other people. Goodness is when that attitude is expressed in particular acts of kindness to another person. So you might say that goodness is kindness expressed. I have two takeaways that I really want us to pull from here as I kind of wrap this up. First of all, we need to expect God's goodness in our life. The second thing is we need to recognize God's goodness in our life. And then we need to thank God for the goodness that He has given us in our lives. We need to thank Him for it. But here's your second takeaway. We need to reflect God's goodness because we are to reflect Christ. We are Christians. We are to show Christ through us. So we need to reflect God's goodness and show God's goodness to other people. Hey, this is Alan again, and we're going to sign off. I thank you for being with me. If I can be of any assistance, give me a call, drop me a text, send me an email. Love you guys. I'll be seeing you probably just in the next few days. Catch you later.